Welcome to our presentation about books for first year seminars. We're going to talk about books that really do tackle important issues like mental illness, climate change, immigration. And to join me here is Michael Fynan and Kim Racon, and I am Diane Burrowes. Please make sure to take a look at our resources. We have a fabulous website, harperfirstyear.com. We have a first year catalog, teaching guides. We really are proud of our Harper Academic Calling podcast, where we interview authors that will be of keen interest for first year seminars. Email us if you need anything, book recommendation, sample copies. And next up, I'm going to talk about our Speakers Bureau. Danielle and Natalie of our Speakers Bureau are here to help you. If you just don't even know what author you want, but know a theme that you want to cover, please get in touch with them. They can do virtual appearances. They can bring authors to campus for big events, small events. Just let them know what you need, and they will do their very best to help you. And we've got our lovely Jillian, who can help you with bulk orders. If you want to buy in bulk for your students, whether it's in print or in ebook, she's there to help you. She can also do special editions with a note from the president of the college. And these are just gorgeous editions. And she's worked with so many colleges now. She's a real pro. And we're on to our books.
All right, I am thrilled to be kicking off with a book that I was very excited to see on our list since the moment we first found out we'd be publishing it. So some of you may remember Celeste Headley. She is the author of We Need to Talk, and she came to FYE several years ago to speak about that book. She's a veteran radio journalist, and in We Need to Talk, she gives your students tips for how to have effective conversations. It was picked as a first-year book at some universities such as High Point University, Western Carolina University, University of Georgia, and Arizona State University. And so in speaking of race, she takes all of the tips that she gives your students in We Need to Talk and applies them to conversations about race. There are so many books about race that are very important that I'm sure you know a lot about them. They teach your students what they need to know about race, but there are a few books that show your students how to have these actual conversations about race. And that's exactly the gap that Speaking of Race covers. Some of the tips in the book include how to prepare for a conversation, where, when, and how to have the conversation, how to find common ground even when your views clash, how to ask good questions, and what to do if, or should I say when, you screw up, because we will all screw up at some point.
And I'm here to talk about Dare to Speak by Suzanne Nossel, who is the CEO of PEN America. In Dare to Speak, Suzanne delivers a vital and necessary guide to maintaining democratic debate that is open, but at the same time is respectful of the rich diversity of backgrounds and opinions in a changing country, which is very much what we all live in right now. The book is centered on practical principles, which I think it makes it very accessible for readers and for students. And it shows how to use language conscientiously without self-censoring ideas, defending the right to express unpopular views, and protesting without silencing speech. So it's very practical, very engaging, very accessible for readers, and it should be a great pick for your students.
So the next book I want to talk to you about is System Error. This book is written by 3 professors at Stanford University. Rob Reich is a professor of philosophy, Mehran Sahami is a professor of computer science, and Jeremy M. Weinstein is a professor of political science. And so these 3 professors take their respective areas of expertise and examine the way these areas intersect when it comes to technology. So some of the questions that this book handles include: how much oversight does government have over big tech? How much oversight should government have over big tech? Where are the trade-offs there? And what trade-offs have we made in our own lives as far as our own privacy and security for the convenience and even sometimes safety that technology can provide us. And where is the line there? How do we find that line? And so the book is overall a very nuanced look at the role that tech plays in our lives now and the role it ought to play in the future. And this is a topic that's only going to become more and more relevant over the years. So it's a really insightful look into this for your students. And I did have the opportunity to talk with these three authors on our podcast that Diane mentioned earlier, and they were just terrific to talk to. So I'd highly recommend you check that out.
Hi, I'm back to talk about The Hate You Give. I'm sure this is a book you know. It's been used in countless universities as their first year pick. It is a beautiful novel about the aftermath of a police shooting. I think the big news for you now, it's if price has been an issue in your adopting this title, it will now be available in paperback in May 2022.
I'm back to talk about my next book, Diane Burrowes' Punch Me Up to the Gods. It's coming out in paperback really soon, so be sure to take a look at that. It is just a wonderful, wonderful memoir, Brian's memoir about his early years growing up in Ohio as a dark-skinned Black boy who has crushes on other boys. And it's simply wonderful, really. The recounting of Brian's experiences, they will make you cringe, they will make you laugh, some will make your heart break, but they reveal a perpetual outsider who is just awkwardly always trying to squirm his way in. It's framed around Gwendolyn Brooks' poem, We Real Cool, which is the poem that is iconic, and it's a loving ode to Black boyhood. And it's a really, really interesting way of framing this memoir and thinking about Brian's experiences growing up. Punch Me Up to the Gods is playful, poignant, and wholly original, and I do hope you check it out.
All right, next up, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Of Blood and Sweat by Clyde Ford. So Clyde Ford is the author of several books. His most recent one you may know was Think Black, which was a first-year favorite of ours. Of Blood and Sweat, in this book, he demonstrates how time and time again in American history, Black labor has been used to create white institutions of power and wealth while excluding Black Americans from reaping their benefits. So some examples of this are fairly obvious, such as Black labor that was used for agriculture throughout slavery. But some are less obvious, such as policing, which was an institution that Black Americans had no hand in creating, but at the time it was, and in many ways still is today, used to control Black Americans. So it is a very insightful look there. And we actually had the pleasure of having Clyde speak to us at Harper about race in America for an in-company talk. It was very insightful. He's a very smart and warm speaker, so he is great for campus visits.
All right, my next book is South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon Line to Understand the Soul of a Nation by Dr. Imani Perry. In South to America, Imani shows that the meaning of American is inextricably linked with the South, and that our understanding of its history and culture is key to understanding America as a whole. It's shaped around Imani's own travels. So there's part travelogue to this book, and it's part learning experience as you follow Imani on her way around. It's a fascinating, fascinating look at what the South means and is, and how we experience it, and how Imani experiences it as a Black woman. She is a professor at Princeton. She is very engaging, incredibly dynamic, and she will do well with talking to your students.
Hi, my next book is Dear America, which has been a common read phenomenon for a lot of reasons. And one is the author himself, Jose Antonio Vargas, who's a charming speaker, a poignant speaker. And his book really is a grand coming out story. He comes out as gay, he comes out as an undocumented citizen. It's a beautiful, beautiful book about a man who loves this country, but is not considered one of our own. Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow, said, "This riveting, courageous memoir ought to be mandatory reading for every American." And I totally agree with that. He's just a phenomenon on campus. So please ask anybody who has adopted the book for their common read. You'll see them listed here, and they will tell you the same.
My next book is Unforgetting by Roberto Lovato. It's another memoir. Roberto is the child of Salvadorian immigrants. He grew up in the 1970s and 1980s in San Francisco as the MS-13 and other notorious Salvadorian gangs were forming in California. So on the one hand, this is a story about growing up in the midst of violence and chaos, and the figure of Roberto's father looms rather large in this book in all its complicated ways that relationship plays out. But it's also the story of Roberto trading sort of a life of chaos and violence for one of human rights advocacy in wartime El Salvador. It's a great memoir that talks about a lot of complicated issues and thinking about the role that America plays in other places that most Americans maybe don't think about, that extended reach. It's a very accessible text, and we do have a teaching guide available for it.
All right, next up we have Children of the Land by Marcelo Hernandez Castillo. This is his memoir of his experiences as an undocumented Mexican immigrant. Marcelo was also an award-winning poet, and his gift with language really translates into the prose of Children of the Land. It makes it an incredibly engaging and accessible read for your students. Just to give an example, it opens up with Marcelo's experience as a child with an ICE raid at his home, and it's just this incredibly moving experience, and it only goes on from there. It was an NPR Best Book of the Year in 2020, and I want to read you a quote from the Los Angeles Times, which I think speaks to just how powerful this book is. In this courageous memoir, Castillo lays bare his emotional truths with remarkable intimacy and insight. Ever the poet, Castillo can't resist a lyrical stroke here and there, like when he describes arriving in Mexico, quote, the same way as the light entered the rosary, and when we departed the corridors of its prisons, we did so no longer wholly intact either, a little broken, end quote. The same outcome awaits the reader who encounters this book.
My next title is the anthology Alien Nation, which is edited by Sofia Stefanovic. It is a collection of 36 tales of immigration that are told by famous people and real, regular, but also fascinating people. It was adapted from a storytelling event, which makes this book kind of unique in some ways. And it captures the firsthand experience of the past and present of immigration. These stories are funny, some of them are painful, some of them are truly weird. And it reminds us, the collection as a whole reminds us that immigration isn't just a word that we hear about in the news, but it's a world that contains many unique voices, perspectives, and experiences. It's fascinating, and I absolutely love it. And there's a richness to it that I think is unlike any other. So I really hope you enjoy.
My next book is The Naked Don't Fear the Water by Matthew Akins. Matthew is a journalist, an award-winning one at that, and he spent many years in Afghanistan reporting, where he became very close to Omar, who was his translator and also his cab driver. And at a certain point, Omar's life became so difficult that he decided he needed to leave Afghanistan. And Matthew decided to join him. He gave up his passport and just said, I'm going on that journey with you. And this will open up your students' eyes to why someone would have to decide to do that, a tough decision to leave your family and your country, what happens along the way, and how, in the end, can we make this more humane? It's just a beautiful book, and I really feel like it will open your students' eyes to a world that they will never know.
All right, next up we have The Future Earth by Eric Holthaus. So there are so many books on climate change that have been used for common reads over the years. You may know some of them. There are all the doomsday predictions, the casting of blame. The Future Earth offers something different, and that is hope. But make no mistake, Eric is very clear about how we won't be able to avoid the consequences of climate change completely. It's already, unfortunately, too late for that. But what he does in The Future Earth is he lays out almost a future history in a way, a roadmap for things that we can do over the next several decades, both on an individual level and collectively as a society, to mitigate the damage that climate change will cost over the years. He also, another aspect of the book that I really liked, he emphasizes the inequality of climate change, how the most privileged are the ones who perpetuate it, and the most vulnerable are the ones who feel its most immediate consequences. So he gives this topic a very intersectional look and shows how the fight against climate change in many ways ties together into other social justice causes.
My next book, A Bigger Picture, really tries to bring in new voices, much needed voices, into the climate change crisis discussion. As we know, everyone will suffer from climate change, but some will suffer more. And Vanessa is from Uganda, and she is the founder of the Rise Up Climate movement. And she is working on a project to bring solar panels to all of the Ugandan schools. This is really a manifesto as well as a memoir about climate justice and how we can and must build a livable future for everybody, inclusive to all. And she is really a rising star. And although she is in Uganda, I hear tell she is a Zoom pro, so she can make campus visits virtually.
My next title is Animal Vegetable Junk, A History of Food from Sustainable to Suicidal by Mark Bittman. We all know Mark Bittman. We love his recipes. We love to make what Mark Bittman makes to eat. This book is a food history book. So we know that the history of Homo sapiens has also been told through technology and through economics. And this is one that tells the story through food. Food is something that we all need to partake in. Mark tells the story of how we hunted and gathered. He explains our emergence as a species, as a new species, and our earliest technology through our first food systems, from fire to agriculture. He tells where we settled and how civilizations expanded through their food patterns. The quest for food for growing populations drove exploration, colonialism, slavery, and even capitalism. And it's a wonderfully accessible history of something that we all take part in every single day. There's also a digital audio, and the paperback is coming out in April.
My next book up is Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat by Hal Herzog. He is a professor at Western Carolina University, and not only is he a very funny man, but he really makes students see how illogical they are about animals. It's just tough to think about animals in a logical way. The way we think about them, he makes clear, is a cultural construct. And he gives them the tools to have these conversations. And along the way, he also gives them the tools to have debates about other issues where they might have to get out of their own way and their own ways of thinking. It's just a brilliant book. There's a teaching guide, and Hal is just a wonderful speaker on campus.
All right, next up, I'm going to talk to you about Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Taussig. Rebecca has a PhD in disability studies, and she is disabled herself. You may know her from this book. It's been out for a few years now, but you also may know her from her Instagram account at @sitting_pretty. And she created this account because she felt like disabled people weren't adequately represented. And this affects everybody in two ways. Disabled people weren't seeing stories about themselves that they could relate to. And non-disabled people, as a result, had a very narrow, one-dimensional view of disability and what that experience is like. And so Rebecca strives to paint a more nuanced portrait of disability. It can be tough and uncomfortable, which is often how it's portrayed, but it can also be just fine. It can be ordinary. It can even be fulfilling. It can be so many different things. And she really strives to give a more complete picture of disability. And in this book, Sitting Pretty, which is a memoir and essay, she expands on that message. If any of you were at NODA a couple years ago, you may remember her. She was a speaker there. And she is that academic who can really take complex topics and distill them down to their essentials in a way that is informative and also very engaging. So she is terrific for campus visits as well.
My next title is the illustrated memoir, And Now I Spill the Family Secrets by Margaret Kimball. Every family has stuff that they don't talk about. And the thing that Margaret's family didn't talk about was that in 1988, when Margaret Kimball was only 4 years old, her mother attempted suicide on Mother's Day. This becomes one of the many things that her family doesn't talk about. And so Margaret decided to create a visual journey through things that we don't tell each other in our families. Using old diary entries, hospital records, home videos, and other archives, Margaret pieces together a narrative map of her childhood. And it's fascinating because it's done through the medium of the graphic novel. We learn about her mother's bipolar disorder, her grandmother's institutionalization, and her brother's increasing struggles. And this is a book that talks about mental health and mental illness in ways that I don't think we really see because of how visually it's all represented. If you or your students liked Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, this is a great book that is along those very same lines. It talks about fractured families as well as talking about mental health, and it's a great way into often difficult topics for students.
My next book is The Perfect Other, a memoir of my sister. Kaylee's glamorous older sister, who she had just adored, suddenly in her late teens started showing signs of schizophrenia and was eventually institutionalized. And Kaylee really deals with that journey that she and her mother and her sister went on together. It's beautifully written, it's heartbreaking, it deals with the shame that sometimes happens when family members try to hide somebody's mental illness. It deals with the guilt in the aftermath of her sister's death and how to rebuild her life, answering all those questions. What could I have done differently? How could she be gone? And really how to find some sort of peace at the end of that journey. It's just beautifully done. She's a young woman in her 20s, and I think a lot of your students will really relate to her and her journey.
My last title today is the only other work of fiction that we have on our list. It's Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. Ansel Packer is scheduled to die in 12 hours. He knows what he's done, and now he awaits execution, the same fate that he enacted on girls so many years ago. Ansel doesn't want to die, but he wants his life to be understood. Through a kaleidoscope of women, a mother, a sister, a homicide detective, we learn the story of Ansel's life. As the clock ticks down, these three women sift through the choices that culminate in unbelievable tragedy, exploring the fissures that such destruction inevitably leaves in its wake. This is a novel that blends suspense with astonishing empathy. I have really never read another book like it. And it presents a chilling portrait of womanhood as it simultaneously unravels the familiar narrative of the American serial killer and stories about violent men. It interrogates our system of justice and our cultural obsession with crime stories. And it asks readers to consider many, many difficult questions about these increasingly common types of stories. It's an amazing, amazing book. It's getting a lot of attention in review circles right now. So I do hope you take a look at it.
Hi, I'm here to talk about Getting from College to Career. Now, Lindsay Pollock's book just keeps selling and selling for us. And I think you probably guessed the answer is that when you ask students why they're in college, it's to get a job. And here are very pragmatic ways that Lindsay outlines for them. It's been used in all sorts of first-year seminar courses and career planning courses. It's just very hands-on, very useful. And I really think that your students will get a lot out of it because the reason they're in college right now is to get that career, get that job. And thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in these titles, please email us if you have a request for a sample copy for first year committee or for a first year seminar. We're here to help you. Make sure to take a look at our website, harperfirstyear.com. And we hope that you have a lovely, lovely conference. Take care.